All right, let's look at Sigmund Freud. Okay, Sigmund Freud, like Karl Marx, is also extremely influential. He practiced medicine in Vienna. He was a psychologist, and so there were a lot of young women who came to him as patients, and Freud would ask them, "What's wrong with you?" And the woman would say, "I'm hysterical." Okay, and at that time, hysterical just meant that depressed or anxious. I can't control my emotions. If a man talks to me, I stutter and I run away. Okay, and I can't have personal relationships. I can't sleep. I'm sweating. I'm anxious. And then Freud, of course, would ask them, "Why is this happening to you?" Okay, and then the woman would say, "Because when I was younger, when I was a little girl, my father raped me." Okay, incest. That's why this happened to me. And then Freud's like, "Wow, that sounds really strange." But then he looked at the literature, he talked to many patients, and he recognized that everyone was telling him the same thing. And it's true. I mean, it's just pure logic, right? If you are abused as a young girl by your father, you're gonna have a lot of social problems when you get older, okay? Especially with men. And so he collects all this research and he published a paper, which is very good, called The Etiology of Hysteria. And so, Emma, can you read, please?
Above all, my previously communicated assumption that trauma, specifically sexual trauma, cannot be stressed enough as a pathogenic agent was confirmed anew. Even children of respected, high-minded, puritanical families fall victim to real rape much more frequently than others had dared to suspect.
Okay, so this is what he's saying is this: rape is a really common phenomenon, especially among higher society. Okay, keep on going.
Either the parents themselves seek substitution for their lack of sexual satisfaction in this pathological manner, or else trusted persons such as relatives, uncles, aunts, grandparents, tutors, servants abuse the ignorance and innocence of children. The obvious objection that we are dealing with sexual fantasies of the child himself, that is, with hysterical lies, unfortunately is weakened by the multitude of confessions of this kind on the part of patients in analysis to assaults on children.
Okay, so what he's saying is, first of all, rape is very common, and these children are saying the same thing, okay? Keep on going.
If we try in an approximately similar way to induce the symptoms of hysteria to make themselves heard as witnesses to the history of the origin of the illness, we must take our start from Joseph Breuer's momentous discovery. The symptoms of hysteria, apart from the stigmata, are determined by certain experiences of the patients which have operated in a traumatic fashion and which are being reproduced in his psychical life in the form of mimic symbols.
Okay, so the idea is very simple, okay? These women, when they're being hysterical, when they're being anxious, depressed, it's because they suffered real trauma when they were younger. They're not making this up, okay? They're not imagining this, because a lot of people are accusing them of like, you're just fantasizing this, okay? And he's saying, no, no, no. The science tells us, the research tells us that you can only have these symptoms if you yourself experience it, okay? You cannot imagine a leg injury. You have to be hit by a car to have a leg injury. And this is what he's saying. You have to be raped by your father or a trusted friend or a relative in order to have these symptoms. Otherwise, they can't exist. Okay? All right, keep on going. All right, so this is a book by Jeffrey Mason, okay? And he was, for the longest time, an follower of Freud, okay? Freud was dead, but he himself looked at Freud's personal letters. And what he discovered was there's a sharp break, okay? And early Freud was very scientific. He believed the woman who were his patients, but then later on, for whatever reason, he changes everything, okay? So can you keep on reading, Amber?
I therefore put forward the thesis that at the bottom of every case of hysteria, there are one or more occurrences of premature sexual experience, occurrences which belong to the earliest years of childhood, but which can be reproduced through the work of psychoanalysis in spite of the intervening decades.
Okay, so again, he's writing these letters to his friends, and he's saying very clearly, I am certain, 100% certain that if these women are suffering from depression or anxiety, it must be because of sexual abuse at an earlier age. And when I talk to them, I can reconstruct the experience, okay? Because even though they're traumatized, the memory is still there. So through talk therapy, I can slowly reconstruct the experience, and this will help them heal, okay? And this is true. If the women are able to reconstruct this experience and they feel as though someone believes them, advocates for them, they will feel much more safe about the world, okay? So this is true. This is very simple. Okay, keep on going.
There are, however, a whole number of other things that vouch for the reality of infantile sexual scenes. In the first place, there is the uniformity which they exhibit in certain details, which is a necessary consequence if the preconditions of these experiences are always of the same kind, but which would otherwise lead us to believe that there were secret understandings between the various patients.
Okay, so what he's saying is it possible there's conspiracy among these patients? Possibly, but they're telling me, they're giving me like these details. And these details make a lot of sense. Okay, so he doesn't believe it's a conspiracy, but he does not discount the possibility of a conspiracy because he's a scientist. He wants to be rigorous. He wants to be absolutely certain. Okay, keep on going.
In the second place, patients sometimes describe as harmless events whose significance they obviously do not understand, since they would be bound otherwise to be horrified by them. Or again, they mention details without laying any stress on them, which only someone of experience in life can understand and appreciate as subtle traits of reality.
Okay, so he says that one thing about this trauma is disassociation, okay? So these patients will reveal details that would shock anyone else. But she says it indifferently, which means that she was disassociated from the experience when it happened. So just by talking to that person, you're able to reconstruct the experience itself. All right? Does that make sense? All right. Okay, keep on going.
It is less easy to refute the idea that the doctor forces reminiscence of this sort on the patient, that he influences him by suggestion to imagine and reproduce them. Nevertheless, it appears to me equally untenable. I have never yet succeeded in forcing on a patient a scene I was expecting to find in such a way that he seemed to be living through it with all the appropriate feelings. Perhaps others may be more successful in this.
So one major objection is it possible you are implanting false memories in your patient? And what he's saying is, okay, well, I tried this and it doesn't work. And maybe others, I mean, he doesn't deny that it's possible, okay? But he's saying, like, I myself have tried this and it has not worked. So he's being a very rigorous scientist, right? He's looking at all different possibilities, and he's discovering that, no, there's only one possibility, which is like they are telling the truth. So he's advocating for his patients, okay? The problem, though, of course, is that the fathers who are doing this are extremely powerful men. These are Frankists, okay? Remember, Frankists practice father-daughter incest, if you understand, okay? The 17th Franks are very powerful people, especially in Vienna, and this is part of their religion. If you do it over generations, it just becomes multi-generational trauma. You just do it because you're addicted to it, okay? And this is screwing up a lot of these young women. It's making them miserable. Yeah?
So you mentioned that this kind of rape is frequently occurred in upper class. Why does it not so frequently in the lower class?
You know what? That's a good question, okay? And the answer is, if you are an upper class woman, you're much more likely to report this than if you are from the lower class. So we're not saying that this occurs only among the rich. It could also occur among the poor. But it's the rich who have money to send their daughters to psychiatrists. Okay? The rich are educated and therefore they will report this. They will understand this is a bad thing. Okay? So we don't have evidence to suggest that this is more common among rich. Okay? But what this is telling us is that among Frankists, this is very common. All right? All right, so after this happens, after Freud is reporting this and the Frankists are getting angry at him, what happens now is an alliance between Freud and the Frankists. In fact, you could argue that Freud now joins the Frankists. And so now what we'll see is a radical change in how Freud perceives these patients. Okay, so Amber, can you read, please?
Since childhood masturbation is such a general occurrence and is at the same time so poorly remembered, it must have an equivalent in psychic life. And in fact, it is found in the fantasy encountered in most female patients.
Okay, namely that.
Namely, that the father seduced her in childhood. This is the later reworking, which is designed to cover up the recollection of infantile sexual activity and represents an excuse and an extenuation thereof. The grain of truth contained in this fantasy lies in the fact that the father, by way of his innocent caress in earliest childhood, has actually awakened the little girl's sexuality. The same thing applies to the little boy and his mother. It is these same affectionate fathers that are the ones who then endeavor to break the child of the habit of masturbation, of which they themselves had by that time become the unwitting cause. And thus the motives mingle in the most successful fashion to form this fantasy, which often dominates a woman's entire life, seduction fantasy. One part truth, one part gratification of love, and one part revenge.
Okay, so now this is like really weird. Okay, what he's saying is these young girls, these young boys, they want to have sex. They're like sexually obsessed. And whenever a father kisses them, which the father wants to do, they think this is going to lead to sex. But the father recoils at that possibility, and now the young girl feels rejected. But she has all these sexual desires, so she masturbates. But while she's masturbating, she feels anger and guilt at her father, and therefore she makes up these sexual fantasies that the father is raping him. And that's why, and she's determined that the world know of this. That's how angry she is at him, okay? This is complete nonsense. But guess what, guys? This becomes standard mainstream academic knowledge taught in schools and universities for many decades. Okay, this is called the Oedipal complex. That's lecture complex. Have you guys studied this?
Yeah.
It's complete utter nonsense.
Agreed.
All right? Okay, can you keep on reading, Amber? The motives.
The motives for illness often begin to stir in childhood. The love-hungry little girl, unhappy at having to share her parents' affection with her brothers and sisters, realizes that all that tenderness comes flowing back when her parents are made anxious by her illness. The girl now knows a way of calling forth her parents' love and will use this as soon as she has at her disposal the psychical material necessary to produce a morbid state. Once the child has become a woman and, in contradiction of the demands of the childhood, has married an inattentive man who suppresses her will, unstintingly exploits her work, and expends neither affection nor money upon her, illness becomes the only weapon with which she can assert herself in life. It gives her the rest she craves. It forces the man to make sacrifices of money and care that he would not have made to the healthy woman, and it requires him to treat her with care if she recovers, because otherwise a relapse would be waiting in the wings. Her illness is apparently objective and involuntary, as even her doctor will be obliged to testify, and it enables her to employ without conscious self-reproach this useful application of a means that she found effective during childhood.
So why is women being hysterical later in life? Because it allows them to control people. Okay, it draws attention to them. They want attention, but it also makes people obey her whims. Okay, this is gaslighting. All right, this is pure and utter gaslighting. And the guys, this is what psychology is: just pure and utter gaslighting. Okay. All right. The problem, of course, is how do you convince your patient that this is true? And so he develops a mind control technique called dream analysis. Okay, this is his book from the book Interpretation of Dreams. Okay, and it's all just mind control crap where the patient is trying to recall dreams and you're brainwashing that patient. Okay, because if you discuss memory, the person's like, I know what I saw, right? But his dreams, then you can implant false memories. Then you can make suggestions. You can hypnotize that person, okay? And so psychology becomes now mind control. Okay, so can you read, Amber?
I think everyone who occupies himself with dreams will recognize as a very common phenomenon the fact that a dream will give proof of the knowledge and a recollection of matters of which the dreamer, in his waking state, did not imagine himself to be cognizant. In my analytic investigations of the nervous patients, of which I shall speak later, I find that it happens many times every week that I am able to convince them from their dreams that they are perfectly well acquainted with quotations, obscene expressions, etc.
Okay, so do you understand? So when the person is talking about his dream, you can now make suggestions. And that person will believe whatever crap you tell him, okay? And that's a secret of mind control. And guess what, guys? We still use this crap today. All right? All right. So Freud is, of course, gaslighting everyone because he has to protect his patrons, the Frankists, and the Frankists will allow him to will become very famous. He'll get a lot of awards. When the Nazis come to power, he'll go to England where he's well treated. He joins the Royal Academy. The British protect him, and the British will then spread his views. Okay, he has a disciple, Carl Jung, who will take Freud's ideas and turn it into a systematic understanding of how the mind works. And from this, we'll develop neuroscience. Okay? The problem with all this is Pablo Picasso. The problem with all this is, as Buchanan tells us, it's all self-directed inwards, which gets us nowhere. Okay? It's just you looking into yourself. It's navel gazing. And from that, you learn no truth at all. But that's the entire basis of our society. And so this understanding of the mind becomes reflected in popular culture. Okay. Back to Michael Buchanan, he tells us that to be truly free, we all have to be free. We have to be free together. Okay. In each other, we find meaning, purpose, and love. Okay, not in ourselves, but in each other.